They called her cursed, whispered of omens and ghosts. But when his world fell apart, he followed the woman everyone feared. Not for answers, just to feel something real again. What he found in her wasn't superstition. It was salvation. The rider didn't knock. He stumbled forward like a man chasing the last thread of a dream, one boot dragging behind the other, his horse long since abandoned. Blood soaked the side of his coat, and the edge of his hat brim was scorched. His name was Eli Brandt, a drifter no one trusted, a cowboy with too many scars to count, inside and out. The wind pushed him forward one last time before it died, and when he collapsed at the edge of the firelight, the woman didn't flinch. She simply stood from where she knelt beside a clay pot and turned toward him. Her long black hair moved like water. Her name was Asha, and in the nearby town of Three Wells, they called her the Apache Bride, but never to her face. Out here, she had no husband, no family, no tribe, no one. Just the desert, the wind, and the fire she built each night that somehow never went out. Some said she'd been promised to a warrior who died before their wedding day. Others said she had died too and come back. Whatever truth lay between those tales, none of it mattered now. Not to Eli Brandt. Not as the world spun and he bled into the sand at her feet. She moved without haste, kneeling beside him, eyes scanning his wounds with a detachment that was not cruel, just practiced. She pressed her hand to the tear in his coat, fingers already stained from herbs and root paste. "Don't sleep yet," she murmured, her voice low and quiet like it belonged to the fire itself. Eli's eyes cracked open, just barely. "You real?" he rasped. Asha didn't answer. She just lifted his arm across her shoulders and heaved, dragging him toward the small shelter behind her. It was little more than a lean-to against a rock face, branches woven tight for a roof, the smell of sage and smoke thick in the air. He didn't resist. Somewhere past the pain, he knew that even if she was a ghost, even if she was cursed like they said, he had nowhere else to go. Not anymore. The wound had torn across his ribs, shallow but angry, like a blade meant more to warn than kill. She cleaned it in silence. He drifted in and out, catching flashes, her brow furrowed in concentration, her hand steady even when the wind howled hard against the stones, her whisper in a tongue he didn't understand. Hours passed, maybe days. When he woke again, the fire still burned, and she sat across from him with knees pulled up to her chest, watching him like a bird would watch something broken to see if it might fly again. He sat up too fast and winced, breath-catching. "Did I die?" he asked. His voice was sandpaper. Asha shook her head slowly. "Not yet." He stared at her, the pieces of memory rearranging like glass in his head. The chase, the canyon, the men who came for him after what happened in Mercy Bend. He rubbed at his face. "You should have left me." "You came here," she said simply. "Not me." Her tone wasn't accusing, but it wasn't kind either. "Most folk run from this place. You ran to it." He looked down at his bandaged side, at the way the cloth had been wound tight and neat. "You live out here alone?" "I live," she said. "Nothing more." He laughed once, bitter and rough. "They say you're cursed. You know that." "I know what they say. You ain't scared I'll bring trouble?" She turned her head just slightly. "You already did." Eli fell silent. The fire crackled between them, and in the distance, coyotes called. "You got a name?" he asked finally. "Asha." He repeated it once under his breath, letting it settle. "Eli," he said, though he figured she already knew. "I know," she said. For the first time, he frowned. "You know me?" Asha stood, brushing dust from her skirt. "I know what men run from. You wear it." He wanted to argue, to ask what that meant exactly, but he didn't. Because she wasn't wrong. That night, he didn't sleep easy. Dreams came in flashes. The sound of gunfire, the echo of his brother's voice yelling his name, the betrayal that burned deeper than any wound. He woke to sweat and the scent of smoke. Asha was gone, but she'd left a bowl of something hot beside the fire. And outside, tracks in the sand showed she hadn't gone far. He stepped out into the early light, ribs aching, boots dragging through the grit. She stood on a bluff just ahead, facing east, hair whipping in the wind. He didn't speak, just stood beside her. "They'll come," she said. "The men chasing you." "I know. Will you run?" He looked out at the stretch of land before them, endless and bare. Nowhere left to run. Asha nodded, like that was the only answer she expected. Later that day, he asked her why she stayed out here. She didn't answer. But that night, when he asked again, she pointed to the fire. "This doesn't die," she said, "no matter how hard the wind blows." "That's not an answer. It's all I have." He didn't understand it. Not then. By the third day, the wind shifted, and with it came the signs. Crows circling too low. Footprints in the dry creek bed that hadn't been there yesterday. A broken arrow left standing upright in a cairn of stones. Eli stared at it, unease twisting in his gut. "They're close," he said. Asha didn't reply, but her fingers brushed the edge of the fire pit, her jaw tightening just so. He looked at her. "Are you really cursed?" "No," she said. Then, after a pause, "But sometimes people need something to blame." That night, as the stars came out one by one, Asha painted lines on the rocks around the camp. Eli watched. "Wards," she said, "to confuse them. You think that works?" "Only if they believe it does." He shook his head. "And if they don't?" She met his eyes across the fire. "Then you better hope you're faster than they are." Eli didn't sleep at all. When dawn broke, he was still sitting by the fire, rifle across his knees. Asha had vanished again, but her tracks were fresh. He followed them and found her crouched beside a dying rabbit, its back leg twisted, breath shallow. She cupped in her hands and whispered something low. He didn't understand it, but he felt it, like the earth itself paused to listen. When she looked up, he saw tears in her eyes. "What did you say to it?" he asked. "Goodbye," she whispered. By the time they returned to camp, the wind carried more than dust. The riders had come. From men on dark horses, faces wrapped in cloth, eyes hard. Eli recognized two of them. The third had been there when everything went wrong in Mercy Bend. The fourth was new, but his eyes were colder than the rest. Asha didn't hide. She stood in plain view beside the fire, arms at her sides. Eli stepped forward, rifle ready. "We don't want her," one of the men called out. "Just you, Eli." But they were lying. He knew it. He saw the way they looked at her, like she was a prize or a threat. "You're not taking anything from here," Eli said, voice steady. The man laughed. "You really think you can stop us? For guns, one half-dead cowboy, and a woman no one wants." It was Asha who answered. She stepped forward once, barefoot in the dust, voice low and clear. "This land doesn't belong to you, and neither do we." The lead rider spat. "You've got one chance to stand down, boy, or we'll bury you beside her." Eli raised the rifle, but he wasn't fast enough. The first shot rang out from somewhere behind the riders, not from Eli, not from Asha. One of the men dropped from his saddle with a grunt, blood blooming across his chest. Panic exploded, and the fight began. They came to take him. They left with one less heartbeat. But it wasn't Asha's fire that spilled blood first. It was the shadows behind them, the past that never stopped hunting. And what followed proved nothing about her was legend. It was all real. The second shot dropped another rider before the first body hit the dust. Chaos erupted. The two remaining men turned fast, weapons drawn, eyes wide with confusion, as if they'd been sure this would be easy. As if chasing a half-dead cowboy and an Apache woman across the desert meant walking into a graveyard with no one left to fight back. But someone had been watching. Someone neither Eli nor Asha expected. From the ridge above, a figure moved. No coat, no hat, just a rifle balanced steady in dark hands, breath even as a third bullet clipped the shoulder of the man Eli recognized from Mercy Bend. The fourth rider, the one with the ice in his eyes, didn't flinch. He turned and bolted, spurring his horse hard into the dry brush, disappearing in a trail of dust and hoofbeats. Eli fired once more as instinct, not strategy, guided him, but the shot missed, grazing bark as the last man vanished. Silence fell, broken only by the crackle of the fire behind them and the whimpering gasps of the wounded man, now clutching his bleeding shoulder, dragging himself through the dust. Asha didn't move. She hadn't flinched once. Not when the first gunshot rang out, Not when the second man fell with his mouth open and eyes wider than his scream. She just stood there, still and unreadable, as if the desert itself held its breath through her. The shooter appeared a moment later, sliding down from the ridge with practiced ease. Eli's grip tightened on the rifle. He didn't recognize the figure until they stepped into full view. Slim build, sharp cheekbones, and eyes that looked like they'd long since forgotten softness. She was a young woman, younger than Asha, dressed in simple men's clothing that didn't quite fit. Her rifle was old, but polished. Her presence, sudden as it was, didn't surprise Asha. "Taya," Asha said, as if greeting a passing wind. The girl gave a shallow nod. "You said they'd come. You didn't say today." "You came anyway?" Asha replied. "I never left." Eli lowered the rifle slightly, confusion creasing his brow. "She with you?" "Yes," Asha said. The girl, Taya, ignored him, walking toward the dying man without hesitation. He tried to raise his pistol, but her boot found his wrist before he could manage. She kicked the weapon away, then stepped on his hand until he screamed. "You remember Mercy Bend?" she asked, her voice light, too calm. The man choked on blood. We didn't mean to hurt. You meant every bullet," she said, a step back. He curled in on himself like a dying animal. Eli looked away. Taya turned to Asha. "You want him?" Asha looked at the man for a long time, then shook her head. "The desert will take him." So they left him, not out of mercy, but because the land itself had better punishment waiting. By the time they reached the fire again, Eli's head was spinning. The adrenaline, the pain, the questions. He sat heavily, ribs screaming in protest. Taya remained standing, eyes scanning the horizon as if expecting more riders. Eli looked up at Asha. "Who is she?" "Taya's shadow," Asha said simply. "She doesn't belong anywhere, so she stays with me." Taya didn't smile. "Used to be mine," she added quietly. "The man with the gray coat. He shot my brother." Eli felt the weight of it settle like dust in his lungs. "I am sorry." Taya shrugged. "Not your fault. But now he's sorry too." They didn't bury the dead. Asha burned a small bundle of sage, muttered something low into the smoke, and let the fire eat the rest. Taya vanished again by sunset, slipping into the rocks without sound or farewell. Eli couldn't sleep. He sat near the fire, staring at the rifle across his lap, mind racing. "I was supposed to die back there," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "In Mercy Bend. That night, it should have been me." Asha didn't look at him. She was grinding something in a bowl, the scent bitter and strong. "It wasn't," she said. "You don't know what happened. You ran." Eli winced because it was true. He had run. When the bank burned and the town turned to ash, he hadn't stayed. He hadn't tried to save anyone. He'd only thought of his own skin. His brother, Samuel, had been the one with the cause, the one who thought the land could be made fair if only someone stood up. And Eli had watched him die for it. "You think I'm a coward?" he asked. "I think you came to the fire," Asha said softly. "Even if it was the last place you wanted to be." He didn't reply. The next morning, they moved. Asha packed what little she had, scattering dust into the flame until it died without smoke. "We can't stay," she said. "They'll come back." "Eli hesitateth. You got a place in mind?" Asha didn't answer right away. "Then, there's a canyon, south of the sleeping mesa. The stars are clearer there, and no one follows shadows that far." So they traveled, Eli with his rifle, Asha with her silence. The desert stretched wide and cruel, but she seemed to know where every crack in the land would shelter them, where water could be coaxed from rock, where the wind changed shape. On the second night, they found an old cliff dwelling, carved long before any town had risen, before any line was drawn across this land. She lit a fire. He built a small barrier of stones. For the first time, they spoke of things that didn't bleed. "Why do they call you the Apache bride?" he asked, breaking a long quiet. "Because I belonged once," she said, "to a man who never came back from war." "Was he a warrior?" "He was quiet," she replied, "and kind. So yes." "What happened?" "He believed in peace. And they don't let men like that live." Eli swallowed. "I'm sorry." Asha's eyes were distant. "I don't need sorrow. I need fire." and someone who doesn't run when it gets too bright. He looked at her then, not the way others did, like she was strange or untouchable, but like he'd just seen her for the first time. "You're not cursed," he said. "No," she whispered, "but sometimes I wish I was. Then at least they'd leave me be." They didn't sleep that night either. The air was too still. The kind of still that came before something broke. Eli saw it first, movement in the canyon below. A campfire too far out. Horses tied in a circle. He counted 5 figures. No way to tell if they were the same men or worse. He turned to Asha. "We have to move." She shook her head. "No time. They'll see. We stay here, we vanish." "Vanish how?" he asked, panic creeping in. Asha stepped forward. "Do you trust me?" Eli stared at her, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't doubt. "Yes." She reached out and pressed something cool into his palm. A stone, carved with a spiral. "Put this under your tongue," she said. "Don't speak, no matter what you see." He obeyed. What happened next didn't make sense. Not in any way the world taught him. She drew lines in the dust, whispered things that didn't belong to English or Spanish or anything he'd ever heard. The shadows deepened. The air thickened. And then she was gone. Not walked away. Gone. Eli froze. Tried to speak. Couldn't. Down below, the riders passed by. Close enough to see. Close enough to hear the scuff of a boot on stone. But they looked right past him, as if he wasn't there at all. It took hours for the silence to break. And when Asha reappeared, stepping from the wall itself like mist turned solid, Eli fell to his knees. "You're not magic," he whispered. "You're something older." She didn't smile, but her eyes were warm. "They call me strange," she said, "because they didn't know what to call power." He looked at the stone in his palm, still warm from where it had touched his skin. "I think," he said slowly, "you're the first thing in a long time that makes me want to stay." But neither of them knew, just yet, what staying would cost. Because the rider who fled 2 days ago, he hadn't just vanished. He'd gone to find someone worse. The land had hidden them once. But shadows don't shelter forever. While Eli tried to understand the woman who vanished in a stone, the storm brewed on the horizon. Not of dust or fire, but men. Men with old scores and longer memories. 3 days passed. The canyon kept its silence, broken only by wind and the occasional call of a hawk tracing circles above. Eli learned to read its rhythms, how the shadows moved at different paces depending on where the sun hung, how the wind told stories if you listen hard enough. But mostly, he watched Asha. She never seemed to rest. She was always grinding herbs, tying knots of cedar bark and colored twine, speaking softly into the dusk as though the land required a lullaby. He wanted to ask what she was preparing for, but he already knew. "What's it mean?" he asked one morning, holding up one of the charms she'd made, a bone wrapped in red string. "These things you make." "Barriers," she said, gently taking it from him. "Messages to things that listen. Spirits. Sometimes. People." She tied the charm to a tree branch with a soft tug. People don't listen. That much he knew to be true. He spent that day gathering wood, while Asha worked quietly along the cliff wall, marking symbols with pigment pressed from berries and dust. She didn't explain them, and he didn't ask. The symbols weren't for him. That night, the canyon echoed strange. Birds flew in tight circles before disappearing entirely. The fire refused to catch on the first 3 tries. Eli sat close, rifle across his lap, a constant thrum beneath his ribs. When Taya returned, it was nearly midnight. She didn't announce herself, just walked out of the darkness, a branch in her hair, her shirt torn. Eli reached for his weapon until Asha lifted a hand. Calm, silent. Taya collapsed by the fire, breathing hard. "They're coming," she said. Eli didn't move. "How many?" "More than before," she answered, her voice brittle. 7, 8, maybe more. They got dogs now. Asha handed her water and sat beside her. Eli stared into the fire, already seeing the smoke to come. "You sure it's them?" he asked. Taya nodded. Saw the man with the white gloves. Carries a whip, not a gun. Never seen him before, but the others listened to him. Eli's hands clenched. "That's Caleb Rye." Taya looked up. "You know him?" Eli's jaw tightened. He was my father's partner once, until he decided partnership meant ownership. Asha didn't speak, but her fingers moved slowly along a stone in her lap, tracing something only she could see. We need to run, Taya said. No, Asha replied. If we run, they chase. And they won't stop. Then what? Eli snapped. You planning to vanish again? Yes, she said. But not just me this time. Eli stood. I can fight. I'm not afraid. It's not about fear, Asha said, standing too. It's about balance. You bring rage, Eli. But this land doesn't need more rage. It needs protection. He didn't understand. Not fully, but he stayed quiet. That was something Asha had taught him, maybe without trying. The power of silence. By dawn, they were preparing. Not weapons, rituals. Asha mixed ash with river clay and painted lines along the entrance to the canyon, each brushstroke deliberate. She hummed softly, a melody that made Eli's chest ache though he couldn't place why. Taya scattered stones in concentric circles, whispering names Eli had never heard. He watched, unsure if he was witnessing a defense or a prayer. When the first rider came into view, it was just past noon. Eli spotted him through the glare, a pale horse kicking dust over a distant ridge. Then another, then 4 more. By sundown, 8 men camped just outside the canyon mouth. They made no attempt to hide their fire. They wanted to be seen, wanted the fear to set in early. Caleb Rice stood tall among them, his white gloves pristine, his coat too clean for a man who rode through dust. He didn't pace or yell. He just watched. They're waiting for something, Taya said, peering through a crack in the rock. They're waiting for the dark, Asha murmured. Eli loaded his rifle. Then we light the night brighter than hell. But Asha put a hand on the barrel. No, we don't match fire with fire. She handed him a pouch. Inside were 5 stones, each marked with strange lines, sharp edges. Place them where I say. Nothing more. Eli obeyed. He didn't ask what they did. He didn't ask what they were. He trusted her now, more than he trusted bullets. Night fell, and they came. The first dog crossed the canyon edge just after moonrise. Its low growl echoed as it padded forward, hackles raised. Eli aimed, but again, Asha stopped him. Wait. The dog stepped over one of the stones. It yelped, stumbled, then ran, back the way it came. The silence afterward was deeper than before, like the earth itself reconsidered. Then came the men. They moved slower, more cautious. One touched the canyon wall and flinched. Another tried to follow the dog's path and staggered back, clutching his head. Asha stood at the edge of the firelight, unarmed. Go, she said, voice strong. Caleb Rice stepped forward from the pack. You think this spook show frightens me? He said, voice smooth, lips curled in a false grin. I've broken stronger things than you. Asha didn't move. You've forgotten what people do when they're scared, Caleb said, drawing his whip. They get cruel. You're outnumbered, outgunned, out here with a man running from ghosts and a girl who can't even shoot straight. Taya fired. The bullet passed so close to his ear it ripped the edge of his hat clean off. I shoot fine, she said. Caleb didn't flinch. All right, he said. Then we stopped pretending. He whistled once, and something moved behind him. A wagon. Not just any wagon, a cage. Inside it, Samuel. Alive. Eli staggered. No, he whispered. That's not possible. He died. Caleb grinned. He did. But you'd be surprised what a man lives through when he keeps talking. Eli's brother was barely recognizable. Face sunburnt, eyes hollow, ribs visible through a torn shirt. But he was breathing. You want her? Caleb called, gesturing to Asha. You want your ghosts and your charms? Fine, but you don't get both. You come out, Eli. You come alone, or I tear out his tongue and feed it to the dogs. Eli didn't move. Couldn't. He felt the world tilting, balance gone. Asha looked at him. Just one look, and in it, every answer he didn't have. Let me go, he whispered. No, she said. I have to. He's my brother. He is your past, she said. But your future isn't written yet. Eli turned away, his fists clenched. Don't make me choose, he said. You already did, she answered. Outside, Caleb counted. 1. Eli stepped forward. Taya grabbed his sleeve. No. Please. 2. Asha whispered something. The fire behind them surged blue. 3. And Eli stepped into the dark. He stepped into the dark to save his brother. But what waited, there was more than a choice between blood and loyalty. It was a reckoning. And some debts, especially those buried in guilt, demand more than a man can afford. Eli walked slowly, rifle lowered but not discarded, boots crunching over the hard-packed earth. He kept his eyes on Samuel, who sagged against the bars of the cage but raised his head when he saw him. Bruised, bloodied but alive. Eli's throat closed tight around his breath. Everything else faded. Caleb, the men with rifles, the snarling dogs straining at leather leads. It all became static. His brother was alive. Samuel's lips moved, too dry to speak. Eli reached the cage, heart pounding, and gripped the bars. Sam, he rasped, voice shaking. I thought. Caleb clapped once behind him. What a moment. Touching. Real, soul-healing stuff. Now, let's get to the part where you do what you're told. Eli didn't turn around. He kept his eyes on his brother. What did they do to you? Samuel coughed, and when he finally spoke, his voice was sandpaper. Worse than you think, but not as bad as watching you run. Eli ulinshed. Samuel leaned forward, hands slipping between the bars to grip Eli's wrist with what little strength he had. Don't give them Asha. Don't do it. Caleb stepped closer, whip curled in one hand. Oh, I think he might. Eli rose slowly, turning to face the man in the white gloves. Let him go. This isn't about him. Caleb smiled without warmth. Of course it is. Everything's about him. About you. About blood and names and what people owe. This whole mess started because your brother thought a few dusty acres of Apache land were worth dying for. Samuel lifted his head. They were. Caleb crouched beside the cage, the smile dropping. And where did that get you? Samuel didn't answer. Caleb stood. Eli, you want to play savior? Here's your chance. Walk her out. Asha, quiet like. You bring her here, and I walk away. You and your brother ride out. No more bullets. No more ghosts. Eli looked at him. And if I say no? Caleb's expression didn't change. Then I light this canyon up so hot it won't matter what god she prays to. And your brother dies screaming. Behind them, the fire that had burned all night began to flicker unnaturally. Blue flame. Hi, unnatural. Eli's hands curled into fists. You won't touch her. Then say goodbye to your family. But before he could move, before the threat could hang long enough to twist, Samuel grabbed the bars again. Don't trade her, he rasped. She's the only thing still right in this place. Caleb's patience snapped. Enough. He kicked the cage. Samuel cried out, curling around the impact. Eli raised a rifle. Instinct. Rage. But a gun cocked behind him before he could fire. Don't, warned a voice. One of Caleb's men. Close now. Too close. Eli brotze. A second later, the blow came, hard, fast to the base of his skull. The rifle slipped from his hands. The world spun. He hit the ground face first. Caleb stepped over him like he wasn't even there. Take him, he said. Put him in with the brother. Then go get the girl. The last thing Eli saw was the moon, clear and high above the canyon. Then everything went black. He woke to blood in his mouth and a bruise swelling across his temple. Samuel lay beside him, curled on the dirt, unmoving but breathing. The cage stank of rust and sweat. Outside, the camp had grown louder. Fires crackled. Voices shouted in short, angry bursts. The dogs barked without stop. Something was wrong. Eli sat up slowly, head spinning. Sam, he muttered, reaching out. You still with me? Samuel groaned, eyes fluttering open. Wish I wasn't. I'm sorry, Eli said. You always say that. Eli winced. I should have come back. Mercy bend. I ran. I shouldn't be. Samuel looked at him. You think I didn't know you'd run? Hell, I told him you would. Eli's face fell. Samuel sighed. But I never stopped hoping you'd come back. Outside the cage, a figure approached fast. It was Taya. Alone. Hands raised. No rifle. Just her. Eli stood fast, fingers gripping the bars. What are you doing? I told them I'd bring her, Taya said, eyes on Eli. But I lied. What? I'm not bringing Asha. She turned before he could stop her and shouted toward the fire. I'm here. I'll take you to her. Men emerged from the shadows, Caleb among them, his face slick with triumph. Well, he said, looks like some of you still know how to play the game. Taya nodded. I'll lead you to her, but she won't come quiet. She's got traps set. You'll need me to avoid them. Caleb considered her, then waved to two of his men. Go with her. She so much as sneezes wrong. Kill her. Taya didn't flinch. She turned and began walking. They followed, and behind them, just out of reach, the canyon's walls began to hum. It wasn't long before Caleb's men realized something was off. The traps weren't there. The trail curved wrong. The shadows were thicker than they should be. The air itself had grown dense. One of the men whispered, Something's wrong. Taya didn't look back. Keep walking. They did, until the first scream. It came from nowhere. Then a second. Then the third man fell to his knees, clutching his chest. Make it stop, he sobbed. It's in me. His eyes rolled white. The others opened fire, wild, senseless shots into stone and night. But the bullets only echoed, louder than gunpowder had a right to be. Then the wind rose, sudden, violent. And in the eye of that storm stood Asha. No rifle, no blade, just her. Caleb's men scattered. Taya dropped to the ground and rolled to the side, covering her head. And Asha moved. She stepped into the storm without blinking. Spoke a name Eli didn't understand. The storm cracked like thunder. Then silence. Back at the camp, Eli and Samuel watched the fire gutter low. One of Caleb's men returned, alone. Blood on his coat. No horse. He stumbled past the cages, past the dogs now whimpering with tails between legs, and collapsed in the dust. Caleb grabbed him by the collar. Where is she? The man's eyes were wild. She walked through fire. I swear. She walked through fire, and the canyon lit up. The others, they're gone. Caleb struck him. Hard. Useless, he muttered. Then turned to the cage. Change of plan, he said. No more trades. We burn the canyon. We burn everything in it. Eli shouted. You'll never make it out. Caleb's smile returned. I don't need to. He pulled a flask from his coat. Glass. Thick. Sloshing with oil. He lit it and turned toward the canyon. Eli screamed. Ash! But it was too late. The flame flew. It didn't land. It vanished. Snuffed in the air like a candle in wind. Caleb froze. Then the canyon erupted. Not in fire. In light. Pale blue light. Blinding, cold, ancient. The wind screamed through the gorge like a voice 1,000 years old. The ground beneath their feet trembled. And Asha stepped through the campfire, not around it, through it. Flame curled around her, but didn't burn. Her eyes glowed faintly, and behind her, Taya raised her rifle. Caleb reached for his whip. Too late. The shot tore through his shoulder. He dropped the weapon, screaming. Eli was already on his feet, rattling the cage. Asha touched the bars. They rusted instantly. Collapsed in flakes. Samuel fell forward. Eli caught him. The others ran, Caleb's men, the dogs, everyone. The canyon turned on them, and they felt it. Not with their eyes, with their blood. Only Caleb remained, cradling his arm, rage trembling through him. You're not human, he spat. Asha tilted her head. No, I am more. Then she touched his forehead, and he forgot. Everything. Name, rage, plans, even a way to speak. He collapsed. Empty. They didn't kill him. They left him to wander, silent, nameless. Taya walked ahead, leading the horses they'd stolen from the camp. Eli carried Samuel. Asha walked beside them. They didn't speak until dawn. Then Samuel said, She's not strange. Eli looked at Asha. No, he said. She's the only true thing I've ever seen. The storm broke. The evil scattered. But nothing is clean on land, soaked with old blood. Asha's power had spared them, but power never comes without price. And as Eli held his brother, he began to wonder if this wasn't the end, just the beginning. They left the canyon behind before the sun fully cleared the horizon, the light behind them slow to reach the valley's floor. Samuel rode with Eli, arms looped weakly around his brother's waist, head resting between his shoulder blades. He hadn't spoken again after that dawn murmur, not out of fear nor stubbornness, but weariness. His strength had all but gone. Taya rode ahead, face grim beneath the brim of a stolen hat. She hadn't smiled since they broke camp. Not even when Eli tried to make a joke about how many times she'd save his life. Asha brought up the rear, walking rather than riding, her feet silent against the earth, her eyes sweeping the tree line like she knew something they didn't. The stillness between them felt fragile, like breath before a scream. They made it to a shallow creek by midday. Eli brought the horses down to drink, lowered Samuel gently off the saddle, and laid him in the shade of cottonwood. Asha knelt beside the wounded man, brushing sweat from his brow with the back of her hand. She didn't speak. She just listened to the way his breath caught and dragged, the way his fingers twitched even in sleep. "You can help him," Eli said, crouching beside her. "Can't you?" Asha didn't answer. "I saw what you did to Caleb. You touched his head, and he forgot everything." "That was different," she murmured. "He wanted to be hollow. All I did was pull the cork. And Sam." She finally looked at him. "He's full of splinters. Pieces of pain pushed too deep for too long. I can't pull them all at once, Eli. It would tear him apart. Then do it slow. I already am." He let out a shaky breath and sat back against the tree, pulling his hat low over his brow. "This ain't how I imagined things going." Asha tilted her head. "How did you imagine them?" "I don't know." "Not magic and revenge and forgetting your own name in the middle of fire." She let that settle before saying, "You could leave." He glanced sideways at her. "Don't want to, even if it gets worse. It's already been worse." Taya returned then, spitting creek water from her lips. "We can't stay long. The dogs might be scattered, but someone will find what's left of that camp. That light show of yours burned high enough to get noticed clear to Eden's Hill." Illy Weinst. Eden's Hill's only 10 miles west. Exactly. He looked to Asha. "So, where do we go?" She rose slowly, brushing dirt from her skirt. "We go home." He blinked. "Where's that?" She pointed east, not west. Not to safety. Not to family or towns or old ghosts waiting with open arms. To the place they tried to erase. They traveled under stars that night, moving in silence as the world slept heavy beneath them. Samuel stirred only once, whispering something neither Asha nor Eli could understand, his hand clutching invisible threads. Asha pressed a damp cloth to his chest and whispered back. Not English, not Apache, something older than both. "Where are we headed exactly?" Eli asked, voice low. "To where the red earth meets the black stone," she replied. "That's not an answer. It's the only one that matters." Taya snorted softly. "She talks in riddles when she's scared." "I'm not scared," Asha said. "You should be. That place ain't been stepped in since." Taya broke off. "Since the burning," Asha finished. Eli didn't ask. He'd learned by now that some history carried its weight better unspoken. By morning, the land began to change. The trees thinned. The grass hardened. Red earth cracked underfoot, fractured like old pottery. The sky took on a strange hue, neither dusk nor dawn, even in daylight. And there, rising from the ridge ahead, a line of black stone jutted like broken teeth. "This is it," Asha said. Samuel groaned in his sleep. Eli touched his forehead, finding it hotter than before. "He needs real shelter." "There's a hollow," Asha said, guiding them around the ridge, past a slope where wild lavender grew out of rock. "It used to be a gathering place." Taya hesitated. "And now?" Asha didn't answer. The hollow was still, eerily so. No birds, no wind, no movement, just the sound of boots over stone and Samuel's shallow breathing. A single tree stood at the center of the basin, its bark blackened but alive. At its base lay stones carved in old shapes, stars, spirals, eyes. Eli laid Samuel down gently. Asha knelt beside him and opened a pouch. "What are you doing?" Eli asked. "Calling the ones who came before," she said. Taya bristled. "They haven't answered in years." "They will now." Eli stepped back as Asha drew a circle around Samuel's body. Inside the circle, she placed stones, bones, dried herbs, bits of turquoise. She dipped her fingers in ash and touched each of his limbs, forehead, heart, belly, feet. Then she sang. It wasn't a song like the others. It was low, almost a hum, but with shape and intention. It vibrated in the stone. It moved the tree's leaves. It made Eli's blood feel like water in a boiling pot. Samuel arched suddenly, his back bowing off the ground, mouth open in a silent cry. Asha, Eli reached for him, but Taya held him back. Let her finish. Asha's voice rose, a wordless crescendo that split the air like lightning without sound. Then silence. Samuel collapsed, still as death. Eli broke free, cradling his brother's head. Some? Hey, some. No response. He turned to Asha, panic wild in his voice. What did you do? She didn't speak. Taya stared too. Then Samuel gasped. Deep, violent, real. His eyes flew open. He blinked. Once. Twice. Then, hoarsely, I had the dream again. Eli krotse. The dream. Samuel nodded slowly. The fire. The mountain. The blackbird. Only this time, someone pulled me out. He looked at Asha, and she nodded. I remembered you, he whispered. Your face was made of stars. They didn't stay long. Samuel wasn't strong yet, but he could walk with help. And they all knew time was not their friend. What now? Eli asked, packing the last of their supplies. We just keep running. Asha looked at the tree. No, then what? Taya stepped forward. We sent a message. Eli raised an eyebrow. To who? To the people who still listen, Asha said, and the ones who stopped. That night, they lit a fire in the hollow. Not for warmth, not for food. For visibility. For history. For challenge. It burned blue and white and gold. It danced high and wild. And in the distance, someone watched. A man on horseback. Unmoving. Unblinking. He turned before the fire died down. And rode west. The message spread faster than fire. The Apache bride had returned. The one they tried to burn. The one who walked through death and called lightning by name. Some said she'd cursed the canyon. Others claimed she'd healed a dying man with a kiss and a prayer. By the week's end, every town between Eden's Hill and Wilo Ridge had her name on their tongue. Asha, the witch, the saint, the ghost bride. Some wanted to follow. Some wanted to hunt. But most just wanted to know if it was true. They reached the edge of Mercy Bend on the 7th day. Asha stopped at the ridge, looking down at the crooked wooden fences and tired roofs. Eli stood beside her. You sure? No, she said. Want me to go first? No, she started walking. No krok. No these guys. Just her, bare-faced, braid trailing, eyes steady. The first person to see her was a child. A girl no older than 5. She stood in the dirt path with a stick in one hand and a pebble in the other. She stared, then smiled. You're pretty, the girl said. Asha smiled back. Thank you. The child ran off, giggling. Moments later, doors began to creak open. Windows slid up. Faces leaned out, and recognition bloomed like fire. Some stepped back, some stepped forward, but no one spoke until the old woman stepped from the chapel. She wore white. Her hair was braided in a coil atop her head. Her eyes were pale but sharp. She stared at Asha. Then she said, voice clear as a bell, I told them you'd return. Asha nodded. I said, you burn a girl like that, you better hope the ashes don't rise. Eli blinked. You knew her? The woman chuckled. I helped birth her. You think I don't know my own? Then she turned to the crowd. Well, you gonna stare or you gonna listen? Silence. Then, one by one, the townsfolk stepped closer. To hear, to ask, to remember. And Asha, the girl they called witch, the bride they called strange, stood tall among them all. It began slowly. The first night, they gave her distance. Watched from behind shuttered windows, pretending they weren't. Eli could feel them, eyes like pins tracing every step Asha took. She didn't seem to mind. She moved through the town as if she'd never left, as if she weren't returning to the place that once called her cursed, tried to drown her in smoke and shame. She fetched water from the pump, sat with Samuel beneath the cottonwoods outside the chapel, listened to the wind like it was speaking directly to her. Eli, meanwhile, didn't let go of his rifle. He didn't trust the stillness. and he didn't trust the way the sheriff hadn't shown his face once. "Where's Clanton?" he asked on the second morning, as Taya stitched the worn leather strap on her saddle. "He was here last I passed through." Taya didn't look up. "He's still here. But these days, he hides behind bigger men with cleaner suits." "Caleb?" "No. Worse. The kind who know how to wear guilt like armor." Asha stepped out of the chapel just then, her braid glinting gold in the morning light. She didn't speak to them, just looked toward the general store, then started walking. The bell above the door jingled once. Eli followed. Inside, the storekeeper, a man named Bramble, older now, hair gone mostly gray, froze behind the counter. He saw Asha and dropped the tin he was holding. "Miss," he stammered. "I didn't. We thought, I know," Asha said gently. "You thought I was dead." Bramble swallowed. "They said you were a danger. They said you called storms." "I didn't call the storm," she replied. "It came because someone buried wrong things in the ground and called it peace." He blinked, unsure whether she meant bodies or lies. Maybe both. Eli stepped forward, placing a coin on the counter. "We need bandages. And coffee, if you've got any worth the name." Bramble didn't move at first. Then he nodded slowly, turned, and began gathering supplies with trembling hands. As they left, he called after them. "Asha." She turned. "I was a coward. I knew what they were doing was wrong. But you didn't stop them." He shook his head. She didn't answer. But she didn't curse him, either. Outside, the sun had risen higher. The town looked the same, but the people had started peeking out, watching her, whispering. By noon, 3 women approached her. One held a bundle of flowers. Another had a jar of honey. The third simply stood with empty hands and a trembling mouth. The one with the flowers stepped forward. "You saved my son," she said. "He had fever, and you made the poultice that drew it out. I never said thank you." The second woman nodded. "You taught my daughter to braid, remember? She still does it the way you showed her. Tight to the scalp. No sleeping luose." Asha said nothing. The third woman dropped to her knees. "I lit the torch," she whispered. "I was the first to shout witch. I don't sleep at night. I see your eyes in the smoke. I see them every time I close mine." Eli reached for Asha's hand, but she stepped forward. She didn't lift the woman up. She didn't curse her, either. Instead, she said, "Then maybe you finally know what it feels like to burn." The woman wept. Asha walked past her. That afternoon, a boy ran through the square shouting, "Sheriff Clanton's coming. He's coming. Ili stimpenet." So did Samuel, who'd managed to walk on his own to the chapel porch. The sheriff came with 4 men. Deputies, or men dressed like them, stiff with badge and borrowed pride. He rode a pale horse, slow through the center of town, eyes fixed ahead. He dismounted in front of the chapel, removed his hat. "Miss Asha," he said, voice careful. "I didn't think we'd meet again." She said nothing. He adjusted his belt. "There's talk spreading west. Stories. Witchcraft. Fire that walks. You made trouble up north." Samuel spoke from the porch. The only trouble she made was surviving. The sheriff's eyes flicked to him. "I know who you are, Samuel Kohler. You don't get to speak on law." "No," Samuel said, "but I know what truth feels like. And you've been walking crooked for years." Clanton's jaw tightened. "I didn't light the fire. But you watched," Asha said. "You watched, and you didn't stop it." He looked at her, really looked, and for a moment, Eli thought the man might break. Instead, Clanton turned to the crowd that had gathered. Quiet, nervous, waiting for him to give them permission to be angry or afraid. "The law was wrong," he said, "but the law was followed. That's not something I can undo." "No," Asha said, "but you can choose what comes next." He stared at her. "What do you want?" "I want you to listen." That night, the town gathered in the chapel, the same one where they'd held the meeting that condemned her. But this time, Asha stood at the front. She didn't preach. She told stories. Of her mother, who sang to the river. Of her father, who taught her to track by shadow and smell. Of the medicine woman who named her Asha because it meant hope, and said that sometimes hope needed teeth. She told them about Mercy Bend, about the night the wind changed, about the way people stopped looking her in the eye, about the whisper that became a verdict, and the hands that threw her into the fire before she had a chance to scream. No one interrupted. No one denied. Some cried. Some looked away, but all listened. When she finished, the room was silent. Then a voice from the back. What do we do now? Asha stepped down from the pulpit. Now, she said, you stop pretending nothing happened. The next day, someone painted over the sign at the old gallows. Another brought bread. Someone else laid a feather at her doorstep. Small things, but real. And yet, the peace didn't last. Not long, because some ghosts refused to stay buried. It started with the preacher. He was new, young, came from the east just 2 months before Asha returned. He hadn't been part of the past, hadn't thrown torches or shouted in the square. But he was afraid of what Asha represented, afraid of the way people had begun listening to her instead of him. He preached louder, about purity, about the dangers of false prophets. He pointed at her without naming her, and some began to nod. It didn't take long for whispers to rise again. She walks too quiet. She hasn't aged. She dreams things before they happen. She healed that man too fast. She's not right. She's not one of us. Taya hurt first, then Eli. By the 4th day, someone carved the word witch into the chapel's back wall. Samuel found it, scrubbed it clean, spat blood doing it. When Eli saw it, he stormed into the saloon, slammed his cup on the bar, and shouted, If I hear one more lie whispered about her, I'll make sure you don't get the teeth to whisper again. No one met his eyes. But they didn't stop whispering either. That night, Asha sat alone by the well. Eli found her there. They're scared of you again, he said. They were never not scared. He sat beside her. I don't get it. You saved them. Doesn't matter. Why? Because saving someone doesn't make you safe to them. He looked at her. I'm staying, he said. She didn't look back. Even if they come for me again? Yes. She turned then. Even if I don't fight back this time? He swallowed. Especially then. She smiled. A real one. The first in days. That night, the preacher held a secret meeting. Not in the chapel. Out in the hills. 6 men. All armed. All angry. One of them had blood under his fingernails from carving that word. They passed around torches. The preacher said, Fire cleanses. The others nodded. They didn't know someone watched from the ridge. Taya, silent as smoke. She didn't follow them. Not yet. She rode fast back to town. Woke Eli with a rock at the window. They're coming, she said. With fire. With hate. Eli didn't ask who. He just grabbed his rifle and ran. The preacher's torch was the first to light. He stood on the edge of Mercy Bend with his arm raised high, the flame clawing at the sky as though trying to rip a hole clean through it. 6 others surrounded him, their faces tight with fury and faith twisted into something too hard to recognize. They didn't march. They didn't shout. They walked in silence, like men convinced God himself was guiding every step. They're headed to the chapel, Taya hissed. Ilias Yov looked at. She's not there. No, Taya said. She's at the old well. Eli moved fast, boots pounding earth, rifle bouncing against his back. Taya kept pace, her breath short and sharp. They didn't stop to wake Samuel, though he'd already heard. He sat up on the chapel porch, face pale with rage, and reached for his pistol with trembling hands. But even Samuel knew he wasn't strong enough for another fight. She doesn't know they're coming, Taya said as they cut through the back of the stables. She always knows, Eli muttered, but knowing ain't the same as surviving. The firelight cast flickering shadows across the town's eastern edge as they reached the well. Asha was seated on the low stone rim, braid loose, head tilted toward the stars like she was listening to some ancient lullaby. She turned before they called her name. They're coming, she said simply. Eli nodded, out of breath. You know? Yes. You gonna run? No, you gonna fight? She looked down at her hands. Not like before. Taya unslung her bow. We can hold them off. They're not soldiers, Asha murmured. They're neighbors. They're a mob. Eli snapped. Don't give them a softer name just because they wear boots like yours. Asha rose. It's not about names. It's about what ends when you say them. What does that even mean? He snapped. But she didn't answer. Instead, she walked to the center of the square and stood alone, a silhouette painted by fire. The mob stopped 20 yards out. Clanton wasn't among them. Neither was Bramble or the old women or the mothers who'd come to her with tears in their throats. These were new zealots, men stirred by a preacher's call and an old town's guilt that never learned how to stay buried. The preacher stepped forward, eyes burning with something Eli didn't recognize. Not piety, not righteousness, something smaller and uglier. Which, he said, you don't belong here. Asha didn't blink. Then where do I? He hesitated. Back where you came from. And where was that? She asked softly. He opened his mouth, then shut it. Because the truth was, she'd come from here. Born in Mercy Bend, raised on its dust and water, braided by its girls, taught by its elders, until the day they decided she wasn't theirs anymore. Until the day they'd lit a fire beneath her feet. Leave now, he said, or we'll finish what should have ended years ago. Behind her, Eli stepped forward, rifle aimed low but ready. Taya's arrow knocked, silent. You want to start something? Eli called. Try it. The preacher's smile twisted. You'd kill your own kind for her. I'd kill cowards who hide their hate behind scripture. Eli, Asha said gently. He didn't lower the rifle. You said you wouldn't fight, the preacher said. I said not like before, Asha answered. And then she raised her hand, not high, not theatrical, just slowly, like offering something unseen to the air. And the wind shifted. It didn't scream. It didn't howl. It just bent around her, bent toward her. Lantern flames flickered. A torch sputtered. The preacher laughed. Parlor tricks. But the wind grew stronger. Dust whipped at their legs. The horses reared in the distance, spooked by something that wasn't there. And the air? It began to hum. Not loud, but deep, inside the chest, inside the teeth. The men shifted, nervous now. What are you? One asked. Me? Asha said. I'm just the mirror. What's that supposed to mean? She stepped forward just once. It means what you see in me is what you buried in yourselves. Fear, rage, guilt. She stopped. But I've made peace with mine. Another gust came, hot and dry. The preacher stepped back, and in that moment, the torch in his hand snapped. Snuffed clean out. Not by a wave, not by magic, by a gust, by the wind, simple and honest. It left him holding only a smoking stick. Asha lowered her hand. The humming stopped, and still she stood, unburned, untouched. The preacher's confidence cracked, just a little. You're dangerous. No, she said. You are, because you need someone to blame. He sneered. The devil talks sweet, don't she? Eli stepped forward, rifle fully raised. Try it. Say one more thing like that. And maybe that was the moment it turned. Not the magic, not the wind, but the fact that someone stood for her. Someone who looked like them, who talked like them, who fought for her, not out of debt or pity, but love. Because suddenly one of the men behind the preacher shifted. Then another, lowered his torch, shuffled back. I didn't sign up for this, he muttered. The preacher turned. Cowards. But they were already backing away. Two more turned. Then a third. In moments, he stood almost alone. Only one man remained by his side. And even he looked unsure. You don't have to stay, Asha told him. He looked at her, then dropped his torch, and walked. The preacher let out a strangled laugh. You think this means anything? He reached into his coat. Eli saw it too fast. Gun, he shouted. Taya loosed an arrow. It struck the preacher's hand, clean through. He screamed, dropped the pistol, fell to his knees. Blood hit the dirt. Asha knelt beside him. He tried to strike her. She didn't flinch. She simply touched his temple and whispered. The preacher froze. His eyes went wide, then soft. He slumped back. Not dead, not hurt, but quiet, empty. He'll wake up, she said. But he won't remember me. Eli stared at her. That's what you did to Caleb. She nodded. Some men can't change. They just need to be forgotten. He didn't argue. He just walked to her side and took her hand. The days that followed changed everything. No one questioned Asha after that. No one dared. But more than that, no one wanted to. The preacher left town, taken by a trader wagon with a bandage on his hand and no memory of why he couldn't sleep near fire. The chapel was repainted, the gallows dismantled. The word which carved into its steps was filled in with cedar dust and honey. An old apology, Taya explained. Illy Steve. So did Asha. And Samuel, slowly, regained his strength. He spoke more now, laughed sometimes, sat by the well, and taught the town's children how to carve whistles from willow wood. The town changed not in grand gestures, but in small ones. A door left open, a meal left at a step, a chair offered before being asked. And Mercy Bend, for the first time in decades, began to feel like its name again. Asha stood at the well one morning, braid tied in a fresh wrap, eyes turned to the ridge beyond the hills. "You thinking of leaving?" Eli asked, wrapping an arm around her waist. "No," she said. "Just watching." "For what?" "For what tries to come back." He nodded. Together they watched. Together they waited. And the land, for now, stayed still. But the fire, what it burned, what it spared, lived on. Spring arrived not with green, but with silence. The earth thawed, slowly. Snow melted into the fields, and birds returned in uneven flocks, uncertain if the land was still listening. Children played near the well again. Laughter came easier, not because everything was healed, but because healing had begun. For the first time in years, the town didn't flinch when the wind changed. Asha spent mornings in the garden behind the chapel, coaxing herbs from the stubborn dirt. Taya helped, mostly in silence. They didn't need words. Not anymore. Some women held stories in their hands, not their mouths. Eli worked the fence line each day, building more than what was asked, longer rails, stronger gates. He said it was for the cattle he didn't yet have. But really, he just liked the sound of Asha's voice calling him in from the field. Samuel had taken a reading again. He'd sit on the chapel steps, book in lap, nodding off in the sun. The children came to him with questions, not for answers, but for stories. He gave them both. For a time, Mercy Bend held its breath and found it could live on peace. But peace was never the end of the story, just a quiet place where the next one began. It started with a rider, dusty, wild-eyed. He came from the north, hard and fast, his horse foaming at the mouth. He didn't stop at the saloon, didn't ask for water. He headed straight for the chapel, straight for Asha. She was waiting. He dismounted before the hooves had even stopped. "Is it true?" he gasped. "Are you her? The one who broke the fire?" Asha didn't answer. He looked desperate. "They said if I found the woman with the braid and the eyes like smoke, I could save my sister. Where is she?" He collapsed to the dirt, hands shaking. 12 miles north. Pine Hollow. Fever took the camp 2 nights ago. 3 dead already. Asha glanced back at Eli, who stood frozen on the porch, watching. She didn't ask permission. She only said, "Saddle the mare." He did. They rode with only what they could carry, herbs, cloth, a sliver of fire starter wrapped in leather. Taya went with them, and the boy led the way. Eli came too, because there was no other choice. Not for him. Not anymore. The fever was worse than they expected. By the time they reached Pine Hollow, the camp had quieted in a way that didn't feel like sleep. 2 more had died in the night. Children this time. Asha didn't wait. She moved from bedroll to bedroll, kneeling beside each sick one, whispering words under her breath. Some were Apache, some weren't words at all, just sounds that had weight and shape and sorrow in them. Eli watched her hands, watched how they moved. Soft, sure, like a woman placing bandages over wounds the world couldn't see. By dusk, one child woke, then another. The camp turned to her like a son they hadn't dared to look at, and the whispers began again. Not curses, worship. She hated it. Later, after the worst had passed, she found Eli sitting near the horses, staring at the horizon like it had something to say. "You think we saved them?" he asked. "We bought them time," she answered. "That's all." She sat beside him. "That's all any of us get." He turned to her. "You think this ends? The fever?" "No." "The running, the needing, the people coming for you, not just to kill you now, but to save themselves." Asha didn't answer, because she knew it didn't. The word had spread, and with word came hunger, not just for healing, but for power. And power, she'd learned, always drew blood. It came 5 days later. Not riders this time. A stagecoach. Black, polished. Wrong. Eli saw it first. That ain't local. Asha stepped out onto the street. The coach stopped. A man emerged. Slim. Pale. Eyes like cracked porcelain. He didn't smile. Miss Asha. She didn't reply. I represent the Federal Territorial Science Division. Ili Dlinked. The what? The man didn't look at him. We've heard reports of phenomena, strange weather, unnatural healings. We're assembling a research compound to the east. We'd like your cooperation. Asha didn't move. The man continued. You be well housed. Federal protected. I'm not a specimen, she said. On the contrary, he said gently, you're something else entirely. And we believe you'd benefit from understanding what that means. I already understand. And what is that? That some things are sacred, and they don't need your name to matter. He studied her, then turned. Another man exited the coach. Taller, hard-eyed, gun visible at the hip. Not a scientist. A handler. Are you refusing federal request, ma'am? Eli stepped forward. She is. The taller man looked at him. You speak for her? No, Asha said. But he bleeds for me. The tall man sneered. We'll be back. You won't find me, she said. You'll come to us. Eventually. He turned. They left. But the promise hung behind them like storm clouds that refused to burst. That night, Eli didn't sleep. He sat on the porch with his rifle, staring at the trees. Taya joined him just before dawn. They'll come back, she said. I know. She'll go. To stop them from hurting the town. I won't let her. You don't get to decide. Eli said nothing. She put a hand on his shoulder. We all knew this was a gift. We just didn't know how long it would last. He stared into the woods. I wanted more time. So did she. At sunrise, Asha was gone. No note. No sound. Just a bundle of herbs on the table. And the scent of ash on the wind. Eli rode hard. But she'd gone east. And east, the land stretched out like a grave waiting for a name. He didn't stop looking. Not that day. Not the next. Not for years. And the stories kept growing. Of the woman with smoke in her eyes. Of the hands that could pull fever from bone. Of the wind that bent around her like it remembered who she was. They called her witch. They called her angel. But the truth? The truth lived only in Mercy Bend. In the chapel, where her braid hung on the wall like a banner. In the garden, where her herbs still grew, though no one watered them. In the old well, where children tossed coins not for wishes, but for her return. And in the man with a crooked smile and tired hands, who sat every evening with a rifle across his lap, whispering her name to the wind. Just in case. Because he believed, not in magic, not in stories, but in her. Always her.